Hey everybody, Kareem here again, doing another video for the Jazz Big Band at Tacoma School of the Arts. And I think last week we left off on talking about major scales and how to practice major scales. We've talked about key signatures and how to finger and spell those scales on our respective instruments. So today what I wanted to do with this video is talk about some different types of scales which are fairly common in terms of scales we need to know to improvise well and to learn how to do jazz better. So obviously, you know, major scales is a good jumping off point, and those are the ones we kind of start with and then we kind of build out from there. But fairly common scales that we want to know about are major scales, and that includes seven modes within the major scales. If you haven't taken the theory courses yet at Tacoma School of the Arts, don't worry about it. You'll learn about those later. But right now, so major scales, and that encompasses 7 other types of scales within those the parameter of major scales. Then we've also got different types of minor scales, harmonic minor, melodic minor, those are fairly common, pentatonic scales, blues scales, whole tone scales, and diminished scales. And those that I just mentioned there, I mean, that covers a lot. So in this video, just wanted to get through most of those if I can in the time we have here, and you know, talk about them a little bit. So starting with major scales, which we talked about before. So let's say we have a C major scale. That would just be, if we start on C, we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. We've got
meow, 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 meow.
And I think in the last video we talked about, you know, knowing the key signature and being able to finger and spell the scale. So so that's our C major scale. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Coming back down, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. From there, what I want to talk about is a harmonic minor, which is a very common minor scale, and we use those in different sounds and different scales that we hear. So harmonic minor is basically, you could look at it like one way of figuring it out. It's a major scale with a flat third and a flat sixth. So if I take that major scale,
meow, 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 meow,
my 3 is E,
meow,
which is going to become E flat,
meow,
and my 6 is A, which is going to become A flat,
meow,
and that gives me
meow, 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 meow.
So that is C harmonic minor. All right, now C harmonic minor, that's C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B natural, C, and coming back down, C, B, A flat, G, F, E flat, D, C. So harmonic minor, there's lots of different ways to figure out how to do that scale, but one other way is say, all right, well, it's the same thing as a major scale with a flat 3 and a flat 6. So we practice those, all 12 of those types of scales.
Meow, 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 meow.
And you get the idea. So beyond that, we also have what's called melodic minor. Some of you've been playing for a while. This kind of crops up in you know, different method books and band music and things. So melodic minor is where you have basically, it's a major. You could look at it like a major scale with a flat third.
Meow, 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 meow.
Now, the way it's typically presented is you go up with a it's a major scale with a flat third going up, and when you come back down, you flat the 7th and the 6th. So it sounds like this going up.
Meow, 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 meow.
And when you come back down, you lower the 7 and the 6.
Meow, 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 meow.
So if you were to do it up and down several degrees of the scale.
Meow, 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 meow. Meow, 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 meow.
So basically, that's the way that typically, at least I was taught in regards to thinking from a classical perspective, is it's a major scale with a flat third going up, and when you come back down, you lower the 6 and the 7. But I've also seen it presented and you're using it in a jazz context. Typically, you would keep it the same way both directions. So that way, you could look at it just like a major scale with a flat 3. So basically, going up and down the same way.
Meow, 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 meow,
So, melodic minor. The cool thing about modes, when you start getting into theory and harmony and studying this stuff a little bit more, you learn that major scales have 7 modes, melodic minor has 7 modes, and harmonic minor has 7 modes. So something to think about later on if you study that kind of stuff. Other scales I wanted to talk about. So whole tone scale or the augmented scale is basically where you're stacking a scale all in terms of whole steps. So if I start here on C, here's the C major scale again. So now that if I look at when I say it's all stacked whole steps, what that means is the distance from C to D, we have that is here's a half step and here's a half step. So that is considered a whole step. So C to C sharp is a half step, C sharp to D is a half step, D to D sharp is a half step, D sharp to E is a half step. Well, a whole tone scale is nothing but whole steps. So the distance from C to D being a whole step, so 1, 2. So whole step, C to D, then D to E is a whole step, then E to F sharp is a whole step, F sharp to G sharp is a whole step. So that gives us so we call this a whole tone scale because basically all the notes together are basically, when you stack them, it's just nothing but whole steps strung together, or 2 half steps like I said. So, and really with this scale there's only 2 whole tone scales. There's one that starts on C, and that also encompasses the D whole tone scale, and E, and F sharp, G sharp, and B flat or A sharp. So that one set of notes has 6 different starting points, basically. And then the other one would be the one that starts on C sharp, so we call it the C sharp whole tone scale. And that one also gives us D sharp, F, G, A, B, and that's all of them. So really, when we talk about major scales, there's 12 major scales. There's 12 harmonic minor scales. There's 12 melodic minor scales. Well, with whole tone scales, there's really only 2 of them in terms of like sets of notes. So you just have to know how to apply them. Let's see. Other ones we've got are diminished scales. This is also, the whole tone, I should back up. The whole tone scale is a symmetrical scale. What I mean by symmetrical is it's all whole steps. Well, another type of symmetrical scale would be diminished. Diminished is symmetrical in that the pattern of half steps and whole steps is the same all the way through. So if I start on C and I go up to D, and then basically, let me back up again. The pattern for this is whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So if I start on C and I go whole step, C, C sharp, D, so that's a whole step. So we go whole step and then half step to D sharp. All right, now from here I would repeat that process and go whole step again to F, so half step, there's my whole step, and then half step to F sharp. So if I keep repeating that pattern until I get back to C, it goes whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So I have so that is the diminished scale. Now, diminished scale, there's only, let me think about this a minute. Yeah, there's only 3 diminished scale finger patterns because each one, because it's a symmetrical scale, it encompasses 4 other types of scales. So like the C diminished scale also is the same thing as the E flat diminished scale or the F sharp diminished scale or the A diminished scale. So for example, if I start on C, I get that set. And then if I start on E flat, I'll get the same sound. I'm just starting on a different note, but it's the same notes. And then the same thing occurs on F sharp. And then the same thing occurs on A. So basically what I'm trying to say here is like there's really only 3 diminished scales, and each one of those scales has 4 different scales built into it. So C has C, E flat, F sharp, and A. Then the next one would be C sharp. So C sharp has built into it, it's going to have C sharp, E, G, and B flat. And then the last one would be D. And that one has D, F, A flat, and B built into it. So like I said, each one of these diminished scales has 4 different scales built into it. So there's really only 3 finger patterns for those. Then what else do we have? We have pentatonics. That's also a fairly common one that we want to know and use. A pentatonic scale, if I go back to my C major scale here. So a general understanding of a basic pentatonic scale, major pentatonic scale, is a major scale, but you get rid of the 4th note and you get rid of the 7th note. Why? Well, if you look at it here, if I go from C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, it goes white key, black key, white key, black key. Well, there's 2 places on the piano where it goes white key, white key. So that, in that instance, you have basically half steps in a scale. So basically what this does when you do a pentatonic scale is you're getting rid of the half steps or the dissonance within the scale. So that occurs between the 3rd note and the 4th note. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 5, 6, 7, 8. Between 7 and 8 and 3 and 4, there's a half step. So for pentatonic scales, you're basically getting rid of the half step in the scale. So you get rid of, for a major scale, you get rid of 4 and you get rid of 7. And when you do that, now there's no longer any half steps in your scale. So you get 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and then 8 again. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8. And the reason they call it a pentatonic scale is it's a 5-note scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then it repeats again on 8. 1 and 8 are the same thing, so they don't count that as a number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes. Pentatonic scale. So, and then beyond that, we have what's called a blues scale now. A blues scale is where you take a pentatonic scale and you add 1 extra half step into that scale. So for a major blues scale, you basically are adding a flat third. So you have a major pentatonic with a flat third added to it. So my major pentatonic is C, D, E, G, A, C. So you add a flat third to that. Now we have. So we call that a blues scale. Now in terms of blues scales, we have major blues scales, we have minor blues scales, and they're basically the same thing. What I mean by that is, again, if you take the theory courses at Tacoma School of the Arts, Paul Elliott does a great job of talking about major and relative minor. Every major scale has a relative minor scale, which is found on the 6th degree, and it shares the same set of notes. So if I start on C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I'll play the whole scale. So if I start on the 6th note, and I use the exact same key signature, meaning I'm not changing any notes, I'm just starting on A as my starting point. That's A minor. So A minor is the relative minor of C major. Every major scale has a relative minor and it's found on the 6th degree. Now where this comes in handy when it comes to pentatonics and blues scales is we don't have to practice 12 different major blues scales and 12 different minor blues scales. If you know how to, if you can wrap your brain around the concept of relative minor, you only need to practice the one thing and then know how to apply it. So what I mean by this is if I look at my C major pentatonic, well, the relative minor of that is A, and I can use the same set of notes, so I'm simultaneously playing the A minor pentatonic scale, which starts on A. So basically, it's the same notes. So then when I add that, I remember for the C major blues scale, I added E flat, or a flat third, to my C major pentatonic scale to get the C major blues. Well, if I do that same thing to the A minor one, if I add that E flat in there, well, that's the A minor blues scale. So So yeah, that covers a good chunk of, or most of the scales. Well, there's always more. I mean, there's tons of things to learn, but these are some of the common scales that you come across when you start dealing with learning how to play jazz and to improvise and compose, all these types of things. So major scales, harmonic minor scales, melodic minor scales, augmented or whole tone scales, diminished scales, major pentatonics, minor pentatonics, and the blues scales. That covers a lot. So hopefully this has made some sense. If it doesn't, like I said in other videos, you're always welcome to email me and ask for more help. And also, there's a great book if you want to check out some more theory stuff. It's called The Jazz Theory Book by Mark Levine. It's a very well-written book and covers a lot of these concepts, too, that we're talking about in these videos. But hope you're all doing well and safe and happy and healthy and practicing. And hopefully I'll see you guys sooner than later. Take care.